Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Hilltop Pillbox here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada. And we are kicking it old school today. We are going way back. We're reaching back all the way to the year 1984, back when I was a teenager, and this was the most incredible game I had ever played. And we had Crokinole. So this is the original from 1984. Now I know that there's another one that used counters and whatnot. We're not talking about that one. This is the first one where you got to actually push little ships and planes and boats around and tanks and whatnot, and roll mittfuls of dice and just enjoy the carnage. I'm going to be playing solo here on this one. Being a teacher, you know, it's nice to get your summers, but my other teacher friends, the ones who are newer, have to get summer jobs because you don't get paid that much early on. And also, those who are older also have families and they're off doing things. So, and my other friends all work. So, yeah. And my son's off working and my wife's off working. So I thought, well, shoot, I'll just play one of these old school games. So if you're not familiar with this one, this is the granddaddy of them all. And I bought my copy. I have 3 copies. I used to have 4 or 5, but I gave some away to people who wanted to get into it. And you can get them cheap. I think I bought one for 15 or 20 bucks once. The original I bought for 50 bucks, and that was in 1989. And I bought it the same day that I bought one of these copies of Fortress America, as well as one of those copies of, well, the only copy I have left of Shogun. I used to have a couple of those as well, but now I'm down to just the one, and then the Samurai Swords, which is a re-release. But I bought the 3 of them in the same month, not the same day, but the same month. I needed 2 paychecks to get them all. But they were 50 bucks a pop, and that was back in the 80s in Ontario. And it was just amazing. And so my buddy Darcy and I would play these games, and yeah, you know, didn't know all the rules, but we didn't care. We're chucking mittfuls of dice and blowing stuff up, and with all the requisite sound explosions that we would make, and rat-a-tat-tats and all the rest that we would do, it was a lot of fun. So this really takes me back well, as we always say, right? Our childhood is a simpler time, and we don't appreciate how free it is. So until we get out of it, and then we realize how good we had it when the only thing we had to worry about was washing up for dinner. And now it's everything that adulthood brings, which we embrace, of course. All of us adults, we love it. We love the challenge, and the rewards for it all, raising kids and whatnot. Back to the game, though. There's one thing that we're going to change on this game, though, and it's something my buddy Galen out in Saskatchewan. He's a really bright guy, and he and his buddies would play this at their residence when he was going to the U of S there in Saskatoon. And they had a whole bunch of different little additions they would do. They would have this massive technology chart that everything was up in stages. Cost you like $1 or $2 to research, but you needed to get to level 10 to have it work, and so turn after turn after turn, away you go. That was really, really involved. I don't have those old copies. That's from a long time ago. But something that they also do, they did back then just for fun, and I got to play it with Galen a couple times, and I played on with some of my friends, is we double the income. So we double the income of what each country gets. And it's just for fun. Some of you will say, well, that's going to wreck the balance. Yeah, it probably does. But it does also open up opportunities to you as an aggressive person when you now have twice as much stuff, knowing, of course, that you're facing twice as much stuff. But doubling the income, it makes you really focus on where your enemy's units are, because you want to hit him hardest where he's weakest. And it's just a fun way to keep you on your toes, and it really changes things. So, for instance, you know, Russia, who always starts this game, for those of you who don't know, Russia begins, and then Germany, then Britain, then Japan, and of course Americans finish things off, and then back down to Russia. So Russia starts with 24 bucks IPCs. Okay, So in this game, they're actually going to get 48. And yeah, good times. So we'll see how things go. We'll let you know how round one goes. Again, I'm playing solo, so don't chew up any of the strategies. We're going to try some fun stuff here and see what we can do here in the Axis and Allies from 1984. All right, round one is in the books, and I had some fun here. And we'll just let you know what happens. Now, as you know, with placing units, you can only place up to the amount the territory is worth. But when we're playing in our double income thing, you can double that. So that's why you're going to see more units than looks possible on the board. Well, over here, the Russians did a charge into Ukraine and were successful. They also did a charge into Eastern Europe and failed. The Germans were left with a single fighter at the end of all that. And the Russians lost their fighters and lost their men and one tank. So that wasn't so good for them. Then the Germans just bulked up in here. They didn't take back the Ukraine because they just didn't have enough men to go in there. They could have sent 4 tanks, but they didn't want to risk losing 4 armor over that. And then we have the British taking Finland, Norway with authority. Only lost 1 guy there. They had a bombard and everything, as you know. Big mess over here. Big problem is that the Luftwaffe, which is busy down here in Africa, came down and sank the British battleship off Gibraltar. Landed down here in Africa, but now they're within range here. And as you know, in this game, carriers are not double hit, and you cannot place fighters on newly built carriers. So the British built a couple of carriers. They have to rely on America to load up with fighters on the last round, hoping to dissuade the Luftwaffe, which built a couple of planes. So they've got 5 fighters and a bomber to go after all that. Now, as you remember, transports do fire back at a 1, and subs fire back at a 2. Yes, even at aircraft, because this is 1984, and yeah, those kind of rules hadn't really been figured out by this point. So, what else happened here in Africa? The Germans took Anglo Egypt, Sudan. So the Brits couldn't have that, so they sent over their transport from India and a couple of men and a fighter, and they were able to take them out. And they only lost 1 guy, the guy from Syria, Iraq. But now you can see the Middle East is kind of wide open. The Japanese, of course, strolled into India. The Brits did build their requisite factory somewhere else, whether it's India or South Africa. So we'll see how that goes. But Japan's looking pretty healthy here. Although they don't have a lot of stuff on the board because all they built was a tank, and they spent, of their 20 or their 50 bucks, they spent all of it but $5, which they built a tank with, on technology. And we'll tell you how that worked out for them in just a second. And so Japan came over here and took out the just a carrier and a fighter in Hawaii and a sub. And again, with the sub rules, attacking subs fire and you remove sub casualties. And so the American sub went without a fight, and then everybody else shot and, of course, killed the carrier. And the carrier and the fighter each got a hit back, but 2 battle wagons, so no hits. The Americans had to respond by building a magnificent fleet here that will repel this one, so the Japanese will definitely relocate. And with this kind of money flying around, navies get built. And that's one of the things I do like about doing kind of wacky things every now and again, is that you get to see some things that you might not always see, which is monstrous navies in a game where the prices don't really encourage you to build them, and also the susceptibility that many of these expensive items would be to cheapo subs. Because subs are pretty cheap. They're $8, and you know, a couple of subs can sneak attack a battleship for $24. So, but the Americans, they built a couple of battleships and a couple of subs and a fighter, and the fighter actually went over here. It's going to head over to the UK probably, but we'll see what happens here on turn 2. The Russians built 6 men and 6 tanks, and now can seriously crush this stack here. And now with the Brits in Finland, Norway, they may build a factory there. We'll see. We'll see how Germany responds. Germany built 11 men and a couple of fighters and a tank. So we'll see how this goes on round 2 of Axis and Allies Old School double income. See you in a second. Oh, and just a little tack on here. Also got to tell you that the Brits were able to get industrial technology, which of course everything gets cheaper by a buck. And those Japs got long-range aircraft, so look out. The Brits and the Japs are going to be going at it, which should be fun. Okay, turn 2 is in the books, and it's the tale of two games, I think, going on here. Let's start with the Pacific, since we're on this side right now. So the Americans have brought their fleet up top and didn't build anything in the west this time. But the Japanese had retired to the Carolines, and again, didn't build anything on the continent, except last turn they had built the factory in India, but they didn't construct anything on the continent. They built a bunch of subs over here, and are getting ready for, well, just getting ready for the onslaught that the Americans are going to bring, or so they think, because on this side of the board, the Germans look fairly well in hand. They're pretty getting crushed here by three of their enemies. Granted, they can take back. They could take back Norway, Eastern Europe, and Western Europe all in one shot here, without too terrible much difficulty. Holding them might be a problem, though. The British have built up a decent transport fleet here, and the Americans built everything here in the east to head over. The British did construct some stuff in Africa, wanting to shut this noise down. But as you can see, the Japanese really have no natural enemies on ground here, so they can crank out 6 units per turn from the factory in India, which could put some trouble onto Russia. But Germany's got her own problems right now. We'll see if Russia's able to push the issue a little bit, or if they're going to have to turn around and deal with this Japanese aggression on this side, because they've got Japanese in Persia, and that's only a step from the Caucasus, and some hefty numbers there. So Russians are probably going to have to end up in a two-front war here, but their friends the Brits and the Americans bringing stuff over might not be such a bad thing. But we'll see what happens on turn 3 of this double money Axis and Allies original bonanza in just a moment. Well, with one minor addendum here, again, this is the first time I've played this game in I don't know how long, and I'm finding it very interesting that there are some things that we just take for granted now, especially if you play a lot of G40 or 42. You just assume that North Africa cannot go into sub-Saharan Africa. You assume it. So when I did that first attack from Libya with the tank, I didn't do the typical blitz through to grab this. And I realized that when I said, shoot, how come I don't have that? I should have that. And I realized I hadn't done the blitz. And there's a number of things that as I'm going along, and some of you might be pointing it out in the comments below, about, hey, how you forgot to do this? Hey, what about this? You should have done that. And yeah, you're absolutely right, but just kind of playing on my own here. And like I said, it's been years since I've actually played this game, this version of this game. So forgive me for the rookie mistakes I'm making today, but hey, been a while. All right, on with round 3. All right, the game is continuing, and again, we'll start in the Pacific here. And we've got the Japanese who came back and really bulked up with a bunch of subs, and another battleship. So they've got 3 as well to match the Americans. The Americans, they had to kind of skulk back here to the west coast because they just simply couldn't withstand that mess. But we'll see what happens next round. The Japanese busting out here, taking some Soviet stuff, and were able to take Kazakh with the help of their bomber. And their 4 men took on 3 Soviets and killed all 3 and only lost 2 doing it. So the Russians are a little bit hemmed in a little by the Japanese, and also the Germans are a little resurgent here. Although the Brits took Western Europe back, the Germans did take it for the 6 points, and didn't lose anything taking it either. And the Americans decided to land up in Finland, Norway, instead of down in Africa. They figured that Africa is probably not worth it right now. Plus, they've got another group coming here. So this, along with their, of course, their stack of transports, and the Brits with their stack of transports, probably making the Germans a bit nervous. But the Germans did build a sizable force here in Berlin, and have let Southern Europe kind of just be an airfield for them. They took the Ukraine back with the sneaky move with the transport and the battleship here. It was empty, so they just kind of slid in there and took it. So the Russians, who used to have a fairly nice economy up in the 30s, find themselves down at 18 for this next round. So they'll be making 36, unless they can take some stuff back. I'm pretty sure they'll take the Ukraine back, so that'd be 39. Might be able to take this back, might be able to take Persia, but they do have to be careful, because the Japanese just built 6 shiny new tanks, as well as a bomber down here. So they got to be careful about that. And with the Japanese going to be putting some constant pressure on here in concert with the Germans, well, this is how Russia loses this game. So we'll see if the extra money, although everybody gets extra money, see if the extra money helps give them a few options that might not have been there before. As typically happens in this version of this game, when, as I remember it, as a large Navy and Air Force ends up being built in and around Great Britain. And then the Americans get to decide what they're going to do with their fleets, which are fairly untouchable. They do have to be careful, though. If the Germans get long-range bombers, they can come over here and sink this. Although, remember, transports do shoot back, so we'll see what happens here on turn 4. It's going to be interesting to see these two giants facing off in the Pacific, and resurgent Germany. We'll see what happens on the next round. And a very interesting turn 4. We're going to start with the tech sheet here, and the monies. Russia has not been updated. Russia is down to 13 now. I believe everybody else is current, because I did Japan. Britain might be down, actually, one more, because of losing one more territory. We'll point that out in a second. So not much happened in the Pacific. The Japanese built a couple of subs just to impress upon the Americans the folly of moving this way. Japanese also built 2 factories to go along with their one in India. Japanese were also able to take the northern route to Moscow, as well as the southern route, as well as the Caucasus. So the Caucasus was empty, so they just sent a lone tank, and then they sent their 4 tanks and a bomber here, and took that, suffering no casualties. The Russians have kind of mailed it in here, I think, on defense, which is too bad, because they're going to have to turtle here. They're in a bad way. They really can't venture out. They're going to need some severe help to withstand the next little bit. They didn't get a lot of money on this last round. Somewhere up in 32 or 34 range. So they can't build a ton of stuff with that. A few men, I guess, it'll hold out in Russia, but USSR is getting squeezed. The Germans were able to just kind of bulk things up on the Eastern Front, but they ended up losing Western Europe again, of course. And then the Americans came in and they brought their 4 transports from up north. They just sat there and bridged down from Finland. And their transports, got to move them over. Didn't actually move them over. So they're all over there now. All their stuff's in Western Europe. It looks like they're in Spain. There's just not enough room for them, and I was too lazy to chip everything out. So there you go. But also looking at the weapons development, the Germans got rockets, which they were happy about, but then the Americans and Japanese both also have heavy bombers. So the Japanese probably should have built some bombers with that money, because bombers in this game, as you know, are insanely, powerful, as they attack with 3 dice, kablamo. I know the spirit of the whole thing, and I know that very shortly after the game came out, everybody changed that to 2, or you can roll 3, but just take the highest 2. But hey, I'm playing out of box here, so deal with it. So the Americans built a couple of bombers. They got it by spending $50 on tech, because they really need to get in on the tech game. So the Russians are the only people without tech right now. Africa was a bit of a battlefield here. The German guy came in here with his Air Force. They killed the 2 British units here. There were a couple of tanks and a fighter here, so a bunch of the planes came down and attacked them. And these 2 planes had helped out in here. The Germans lost 3 fighters, but they killed the fighter and 2 tanks that were in there. So those tanks that you see moved up from here. This transport came back here. This Japanese transport is here as it came over from the East Indies and dropped guys in Iraq to stop the British tanks from blitzing through. And yeah, so that's the mess we have here. The German fleet, such as it was, is gone as the Americans sent 2 fighters over and sank the sub and the transport, but lost a fighter doing it. And the American bomber there bombed with 3 dice and got a 5 and 2 2s. So it was $9 off the Germans, who had also lost 1 to the British before. And you can see Bomber Command is going up here. So we're going to see. As an Allied player of this game years ago, I was a big supporter of the constant landings, no matter what it cost you, and building up a bomber force to just bomb the crap out of Berlin here and just squeeze them economically. Which would keep a few tanks off the Eastern Front. We'll see if that actually works out here in the double money, because you don't bomb for double money, especially when you get these heavy bombers. I think that would just be insane. So we'll see how this works out going forward. The Japanese, this kind of rang true in my mind's eye of my memories playing this game, is that there were an awful lot of rising suns. The sun was rising all over the place here in Asia, and it seems to be ringing true again here, as you can see, lots and lots and lots. And I remember back in the day, we actually, when Japan would come over here and colonize Africa, we'd be using pennies and whatnot to try to simulate the Japanese rising sun. Don't have that problem these days, but the memories are great. All right, so that's turn 4, folks. We're going to head to turn 5. And see if the Allies are able to do anything with this mess that they got there, and see if the Germans can do anything with what they got. All right, see you in a minute. All right, well, the hits just keep on coming here as we're traveling through this wonderful game, round 6 here. And Germany was able to wrest away control of Western Europe, and they destroyed all the American and British units that were there. In doing so, and they still had 8 tanks left over, but they did lose 11 men and a few tanks. No planes, though. The anti-air has been very anemic today. The British built some tanks up here in their factory and dropped some guys off there, figuring they didn't have a strong enough force to take that. But they built a couple of bombers and built some guys there. They built 1 bomber. But they also have a stack of 4 tanks here. And again, that stack of 4 tanks up there. So they're getting into the tank game. Americans brought all their guys back here and decided to build 4 bombers. And so they're going to be looking at getting the Mighty 8th up and running. Japan continues to do what Japan does in this game. And they branch out. And it's definitely an ebb and flow. But they're flowing a lot more than they're ebbing right now. So we'll see what happens. The Russians, the only reason they have the Caucasus back is because the American came through on his turn and blitzed through. But the Russians are down here to just about 15 units or so, about 20 units on the board in total. And that's pretty typical for this game. But we'll see what happens here. Japan, of course, had $90 from their last round, so they built, you guessed it, 18 tanks at $5 a pop. So, and this last turn they made $94. So they actually can build another 18 tanks. So I think it's just a matter of time for Russia's out of here. Not really a lot anybody can do to stop the Japanese juggernaut. And they also have heavy bombers. But they didn't build any bombers because they need boots on the ground. I forget who said bombing can win the war. I forget who said that. I don't know if it was... I forget who it was. Maybe it was Bomber Harris. I don't know, in Britain, or... I don't know if it's an American or a Brit or somebody figured that bombing alone could win the war, so we don't have to really risk as many lives as a ground force. And then they quickly realized that the more they bombed, the better Germany's production became. And so they realized they need to get boots on the ground. So that's what Japan here is going to avoid, is putting a bunch of money into expensive bombers and then watching them get shot down and have nothing to show for it. They do wreak a lot of havoc with 3 dice, of course, but there's no territory gained by them. So we really need to get boots on the ground here. The Allies, on the other hand, the Americans can build up the mighty 8th here and let the British do the landings, and hopefully that'll work out for them. But we'll see, because Moscow, I don't think, is not long for this world. I think in 2 turns that'll be it, unless the Allies can get some help over there. The Americans are sending a little task force down here, trying to stay out of the reach of that nasty fleet. And the Brits built a factory in Australia, so the Americans are going to come down here and try to help launch some stuff from there. Although the Americans can't build there, maybe they can grab something on the way by. But we'll see. That the Japanese definitely have the home fleet able to answer anything that the Americans can throw at it right now. So, but we'll see. Maybe those bombers are going to head over to the Pacific and wreak some havoc on the Japanese Navy here. We'll have to wait and see what happens on the next round of Axis and Allies, the good old days. Alright, the end of round 6 has seen some dramatic things happening, so let's take you through it. The Pacific in the north is empty because everything has come down to the south. The Americans have made it to Australia and have gotten together with 3 boats that the Brits built. The Japanese, of course, came down. I'll take a look at that a little bit more closely, and so the Brits will probably be building some boats down here to stop the Japanese fleet from doing anything too crazy. Americans, though, only have a couple of men with them, that they took one out of Western Canada, and Hawaii is now open. But again, the Japs don't have any transports there. They've gone all over here so they can capture Africa yet again. And of course, the Brits didn't build anything here because they built over here and up in Norway. What happened here in Europe? Well, the Germans definitely have a hold on Western Europe now. They got 16 guys in there. And they only had 36 bucks, so they built 12 men and parked them all in there. Brought their tanks across and moved some guys around a little bit. And ended up with what you see here. They did that sneaky move again, took the Caucasus with a couple of men on the transport. They took Karelia for a moment, but the Brits liberated it. Not without cost. They lost 3 men doing it. But that brought Russia, and thanks to the American tank blitzing through Kazakh, it brought Russia way up to 13 bucks. So they're happy about that. I think the story of the day so far was there were 3 big American bombers here. There's 4 that just flew over from the last build. There were 3 here that came to bomb Germany. And this is the German anti-aircraft roll. Shot down all 3 heavy bombers. So that kept the German coffers fuller than they were going to be at the end of this round, which is really bad news for, well, everybody who's not a German or a Japanese player. So, Russia, turtle, of course. The Japanese marshaled all their forces here in Novosibirsk and are probably going to take a shot. See how it goes. The Brits, though, are able to bring in a bunch of tanks before that happens. We'll see if they do that, or if they maybe try to put some pressure on Germany with these forces. It's turning into a rather interesting game, actually. It kind of looked like the Axis were just going to sweep over the board, and they still may. But when the Allies work together, it's tough, especially on Germany. If Russia hasn't fallen by turn 7 or 8, Germany's got some real concerns. But we'll see. See what happens here. The loss of those American bombers puts the Allies back 1 turn, definitely. And we'll see if they can recoup from that here on turn 7 of the Axis and Allies Granddaddy game. And we'll see how it goes in just a moment. Well, that German anti-aircraft is at it again. Shot down 2 of the American bombers out of 4. But the 2 American bombers were so mad they bombed for 24 bucks. Which is quite a bit. So, well, let's see what's going on here. The Pacific, as we know, Eastern Pacific is fairly empty, and the Americans are gone. They came up here, and they actually tried an amphibious assault, because as you know, in the out-of-box rules, if you have battleships, they get to bombard regardless of how many people you're bringing. So they just brought two guys up and attacked, and they killed two tanks, and the men didn't hit anything, and the tanks killed the men, and that was that. But that's two less tanks that the Russians will have to worry about. And the Brits, no doubt, are going to do the same thing on their turn because they need to certainly bulk this up. Might all be for naught, though, because the Japanese do have their 6 subs and, of course, the rest of their fleet, as well as 3 heavy bombers, well within range of the American-British fleet. So, see how that goes. The Japanese have marshaled everything they've got up here in Novosibirsk, and the Russians have, well, done what Russians do. The Germans took Karelia, and the British tried to take it back with their own amphibious assault and the attack from Finland, Norway, and it was a complete disaster. The Germans had 7 tanks left over from their initial attack, and they were able to kill everything that the British brought in. I think the British brought 6 tanks and 2 men or something, and they killed them all and only lost 5 tanks doing it. And in desperation mode, even bombers are landing in Moscow, hoping to soak up some hits for the inevitable battle which is about to take place. The Russians will not be adding anything either, because the Japanese bomber came up and did some major damage, and the Russians only have $2 for this next buy round, so they will not be buying anything. The Germans are very strong, but also very compact. They're not branching out anywhere, and they actually just lost Algeria to the Americans coming down from up north, because they figured this is kind of a lost cause up top. Maybe we'll try to at least stop the bleeding down here in Africa, but it could be too little too late. And we'll see what goes on. Now, of course, as we know in the book, the Axis have to take 2 capitals in order to force a victory, but that's very rare that we ever play that far. So if Russia falls and things are going really well for the Axis, which they are right now, I mean, the Germans are above their starting wage by $3, and the Japanese got 100 last round. Now, of course, that gets whittled down, but when you're getting up in the 90s as Japan, and they really do have no natural enemies right now. It's all about offense, go get them. And you've got heavy bombers and long-range aircraft. It's going to be tough for anybody to really compete with that. So the Germans and the Japanese, also with the out-of-box rules, could claim an economic victory, as right now they have 85. And I believe it's 82 for an economic victory. So they could claim an economic victory and go home. But we want to see this battle happen here. So, and I could be wrong on that economic victory number. It could be 80. I don't think it's 85 though, and that's where they sit right now. So it's looking more and more like an Axis victory outright. But here we go, folks. We're going to do turn 7, and we'll see what happens. Things are looking pretty bleak for the Allies. They don't have much up here. They've lost so much just trying to take stuff back for the Russians. And they're probably going to lose a couple of fleets here, but we'll see. The Japanese may not worry about the fleet and just send these bombers to Moscow to rain death from above with 3 dice apiece. That's 9 dice, folks. 9 dice they'll be using, so going to be crazy. We'll see what happens here on turn 7. Is it the end for the Russians? Well, we're on the Japanese turn right now, and Germany made a bit of a spoiling attack, seeing what they could kill up here in Russia, and they only killed 3 units, and they lost 2 fighters, a bomber, a couple of tanks, and a man doing it, but maybe those 3 might be enough to tilt the balance. The Japanese are not going to be attacking this fleet here, but I thought I would show you the final battle. We've got it all set up here. It looks like it's heavily favored for the Japanese to win, but that's why we roll the dice, isn't it, folks? So we'll see how we do here. We start with our 3 anti-aircraft shots on the bombers. See if they can have that German luck we've been seeing. No, we can't. Alright. So now, typically I like using all my hit dice, as I've been using, but there's just so many here. We're going to go to the, just to the tiny dice here. My little Chessex red dice, and we'll see how we do. We can do the 3 ones though. These guys won't be around very long, so here we go. And they got no hits. Alright. But now we have, these are 5s of course, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, and 5 there. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. We have 35 3s, so that's all but one of the red dice. And we're looking for 3s here. This is going to be a real problem. Now folks, I am going to get my tripod. Just a second. Alright, so here we go. So we've got 35, and we're looking for 3s here. So pardon me as I reach across the lens. Get all of these in here. Alright. Don't have a lot of hope for the Russians here. We'll see what happens though. Okay, so we're going to get rid of all the ones that are higher than 3. That looks like a pretty devastating opening roll actually. Well, maybe not devastating, but number 35. There's 5, 10, 15, 17. Look at that, folks. We are right on the bubble there for the averages. So there you go. That's all that is. So that was 17 hits, and then we have 9 more dice with the bombers. And of course, we're looking for 4s here. Oh well, look at that. I don't know if you can see on the camera there. Let's see. Yeah, I can't see real well, but they got 1 hit. The rest of them are 4s. Oh wait, sorry, there's a 4 there. The rest of them are 5s and 6s though. It's only got 2 hits, so that's 19 hits total. So we're just gonna take 19 off. So we got 5, and we've got 10, and we've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, and there's 19 there, and then there's 18 here, so that's 37 coming back. So we're going to do that, and we'll add a big black one there. Alright, so we got 37 at 2, hoping to get 20 to 25 hits here to make this a sporting chance. Alright, 1s and 2s. Whoa, they did alright. So we'll get rid of a lot of 6s here. So it might be a bit above the curve here, but maybe not. We'll see. That looked a little worse when it was saw a lot of 1s looking at me. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, that's not going to be enough. We got 11 hits, and then we got the 2 fighters at 4. Well, they both hit, so that's 13 hits. Alright, so we're going to get rid of these 3 guys here. 1, 5, 2, 5. Okay. So, just going to pick up the camera here, and we're going to see what we have left. We're down to 18 Russians, and we still got 25 tanks. There's a couple of planes, of course, so I think this one's pretty much in the books, but hey, let's roll these dice here. And if we've learned anything from Lord of the Rings, it ain't over till it's over. Well, the song's over. Let's see how the rest of the battle goes. So we got 25. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This isn't the roll. 5, 15, 20, 25 dice. Alright, here we go. $25 3s we're looking for. That's pretty devastating roll there, I think. So out of 25 dice, we should have gotten 12 or 13, and they got 13 dice. So 13 hits. And then we've got 9 dice from the bombers, who only got 2 out of 9 last time. Well, a little better this time. They got 5 out of 9. Alright, so it's 5, and the 13 is 18 hits. So that takes care of all the men. So the men are all gone. We're down to 2 fighters. So this one's over, folks, but we'll still roll it out. There's 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. 18 at 2. Let's see if we can scratch that armor a bit. Yeah, it's pretty good actually. It's above the curve quite a bit. Supposed to get about a third of the 18 would be 6 hits, and they actually got 10 hits. Okay. And then 2 fighters at 4, both of them hit. So 12 hits total. So got 12. But that's what we're left with now, folks. So, as we do many times in these games, we just say, you know what, those planes are dead, let's let them have their last roll. 1 and a 6, so killed 1 more tank. So I'm going to pause it and I'll show you what the board looks like in just a minute. Well, folks, that looks like that's going to be it. As we look at the board here, although these navies together are pretty... got a pretty good punch defensively. Offensively, there's still no match for what's going on here. And there's really no chance for anybody to do anything against the Japanese economy. They're now way over 100. They just took Russia's, and now they don't need to build, honestly, don't need to build any more tanks. They've still got 12 tanks there, 13 if you count the one up in Karelia. They're definitely going to be taking that British factory, and they can crank out 16 units a turn from Russia. So there's just no way this is going to fall anytime soon, and the Japs are just going to be bringing tanks over here, and they'll probably end up building a fleet there once they smash this with their 6 heavy bombers with the long range on them, so they can fly 8. So even if the Allies come down to here, they can fly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, they're fine. So there's nowhere for the Allies to really hide from long-range aircraft like that. They can fly wherever, and there's only 1 ground unit here that can do any kind of damage with a transport in the next round. And actually in the next round it can't, because you can just come down here and pick it up. It can't go anywhere after that. So I think that's pretty much it, folks. If you think in the comments that the Allies should continue the fight, should carry on, I'll let you know what's going on here. They've got that. They've got lots of transports and a battleship. The Americans have their bombers there, more bombers here, and they have a really good transport fleet. But the Germans have right now 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, something like 80 infantry alone, plus a few tanks. And there was a move by the British. You're probably wondering where the carriers went. They came down here and they brought the British bomber from there to try to sink this thing, so the Americans could come in and take southern Europe just for kicks, because of course they're not going to hold it. But that failed. They had a tip on this, and then the transport actually got a hit and killed. In the second round they got 2 hits, killed both carriers, and then the bomber was killed before it could kill the battleship. So the battleship shot her down before, and the bomber missed. So. But that's pretty much it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this little blast from the past, a little trip down memory lane, and this 7-round game that looked really good for the Allies at the very beginning. Germany was having trouble holding on to Western Europe, Eastern Europe. Ukraine had a small economy, but in the end, the Japanese were able to put so much pressure on that no chance to stop them. Japanese juggernaut. So thanks so much for watching, folks. As always, tell your loved ones that you love them. Hug your friends, your loved ones. Just, hey, spread love, spread the good stuff, folks. And let's focus on that, making people happy, making people have a better day than before they had met us, and we'll all have a better world to live in. So take care, folks, and thanks so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this trip down memory lane, and may those dice be with you.